The void between stars rippled with anticipation as the Zorn Collective's invasion fleet materialized from hyperspace. Thousands of obsidian black ships stretched across the darkness, their biomechanical hulls pulsing with an otherworldly energy that had crushed civilizations for millennia. Commander Krell stood on the bridge of the flagship Dominion, his six-limbed form casting a shadow over holographic displays that confirmed what his species had long believed. Earth was nothing more than an insignificant blue marble waiting to be conquered. Preliminary scans complete, announced Surveillance Officer Vex, his translation matrix converting clicks and bioelectric pulses into standard communication. Planetary defenses are minimal. Technological infrastructure appears rudimentary. Projected resistance, 0.3%. Krell's exoskeletal mandibles clicked with what passed for amusement among the Zorn. Another conquest. Another civilization to be integrated into the collective's vast network. Humanity would be nothing more than a footnote in their galactic history. Deep beneath the Andes Mountains, in a facility that didn't officially exist, Commander Elena Rodriguez watched the incoming fleet with eyes that had seen too much. The scar running from her left temple to her jaw, a souvenir from a classified encounter 15 years ago, seemed to pulse with a memory of another alien probe that had mysteriously disappeared. "They're here," she said quietly to the room filled with the world's most exceptional individuals. No military branch, no single nation, just the best humanity could offer. Kai Chen, the young Hawaiian-born cybersecurity genius, was already working. His fingers flew across multiple holographic interfaces, each one connected to a global network that had been decades in the making. To the left, Dr. Aisha Okoye, a quantum physicist who had spent her entire career preparing for this moment, monitored energy signatures that would make most scientists weep with joy. "Incoming transmission," announced Marcus Rice, a former Special Forces operator who now managed global tactical coordination. His screen filled with the Zorn's broadcast, a message of inevitable subjugation, delivered with the cold certainty of a species that had never known defeat. Krell's message rang out across human communication networks. "Inhabitants of Earth, your technological sophistication is inconsequential. Your planetary resources are hereby claimed by the Zorn Collective. Resistance is mathematically impossible. Surrender is your only logical choice." In command centers around the world, military leaders who had been preparing for this moment exchanged knowing glances. This was the culmination of decades of secret preparation, of building a defense that looked like nothing to an outside observer. Elena Rodriguez pressed a single button. Across the globe, systems that had appeared to be nothing more than satellites, communication arrays, and seemingly mundane infrastructure began to transform. What the Zorn saw as junk and primitive technology was about to become humanity's first line of defense. "Prometheus Protocol initiated," Kai Chen announced, a hint of a smile crossing his face. The young hacker had spent years developing a system that could turn the entire planet into a single adaptive weapon system. Every cell tower, every communication satellite, every seemingly innocuous piece of technology was now part of a massive, interconnected defense network. Dr. Okoye's quantum sensors began to pulse. "Energy signatures are stabilizing," she reported. "Quantum entanglement network is at full capacity." Krell watched his tactical displays with growing confusion. Something was wrong. The preliminary scans should have shown complete planetary vulnerability. Instead, complex energy signatures were beginning to emerge, patterns that defied the Zorn's understanding of planetary defense systems. "Recalibrating scanners," Vex reported, a note of uncertainty entering his typically emotionless voice. In the Andes Command Center, Elena Rodriguez turned to her team. Dmitry Volkov, the former Spetsnaz commander, was already preparing the first wave of response. Marcus Rice monitored global military readiness. Kai Chen continued to work his digital magic. "They thought we were weak," Elena said, her voice low and dangerous. "They thought we were divided." The first wave of Zorn attack ships began their descent toward Earth, completely unaware that they were sailing into a trap decades in the making. Humanity had been waiting. Humanity had been preparing. And the Zorn Collective was about to learn that appearances could be devastatingly deceiving. The first Zorn attack wave descended through Earth's atmosphere like a plague of obsidian daggers. 12,000 ships, each capable of reducing entire cities to ash in seconds, expected nothing more than a perfunctory extermination. Commander Krell watched from the Dominion's bridge, his biomechanical limbs folded in anticipation of an easy victory. Target primary population centers, he instructed. Minimal energy expenditure. Maximum territorial control. What happened next would be recorded in galactic history as the most surprising military engagement ever witnessed. At the Andes Mountain Command Center, Kai Chen's fingers danced across quantum-encrypted interfaces. Initiating Global Defense Network, he announced, his voice calm despite the magnitude of what was about to unfold. Across the planet, what appeared to be ordinary infrastructure transformed. Cell towers became precision targeting systems. Communication satellites reconfigured into a planet-wide sensor grid. Underground facilities, hidden in plain sight for decades, came to life with technologies that would make most scientific minds collapse in awe. The first Zorn ships encountered their first shock over the Pacific Ocean. What should have been an undefended approach turned into a nightmare of impossible precision. Stealth satellites, disguised as space debris for years, unleashed a barrage of quantum disruption weapons. These weren't mere missiles, but sophisticated instruments that began systematically dismantling the Zorn's supposedly impenetrable energy shields. Impossible. Vex screamed, his translation matrix crackling with genuine fear. The tactical displays showed something that defied every known law of warfare in the Collective's extensive database. Each Zorn ship was being targeted not just by conventional weapons, but by a coordinated attack that seemed to predict their movements milliseconds before they happened. Dr. Aisha Okoye monitored the quantum entanglement network from her station. Predictive algorithms are functioning at 99.8% efficiency, she reported to Elena Rodriguez. They never saw this coming. The truth was brutal in its simplicity. Humanity had spent decades preparing not just a defense, but a complete reimagining of planetary warfare. Every piece of technology, every satellite, every seemingly mundane communication system was now part of a living, breathing weapon. In the South China Sea, a flotilla of what appeared to be ordinary cargo ships suddenly transformed. Hydraulic systems shifted, revealing weapon systems that combined technologies from a dozen different nations. Railguns developed in secret laboratories in India. Quantum targeting systems from Israel. Advanced drone swarm technologies from the United States. Adaptive camouflage from Russia. Dmitry Volkov watched the first engagement with the cold eyes of a veteran who had seen humanity's darkest moments. "They think we're divided," he muttered to Marcus Reyes. "They have no idea." The Zorn ships began to fall, not in a dramatic explosion, but in a systematic deconstruction that was almost clinical in its precision. Each vessel was targeted not to destroy, but to neutralize. Quantum disruption fields stripped away shield technologies. Adaptive targeting systems found and exploited microscopic weaknesses in alien hull designs. Commander Krell watched in growing horror. The tactical algorithms that had conquered hundreds of civilizations were useless. Humanity wasn't fighting like any species the Zorn had ever encountered. There was no single point of attack, no central command target. Every piece of human technology was both a weapon and a potential command center. Recalibrating attack vectors, Vex announced, his voice a mixture of desperation and disbelief. But humanity was always 3 steps ahead. Kai Chen had prepared something special. As the Zorn attempted to regroup, he unleashed the true power of the Prometheus Protocol. Communication networks became weapons. Every cell phone, every satellite, every piece of electronic infrastructure was now part of a massive, distributed computing system that could predict and counter alien movements before they even happened. The first wave of Zorn ships, 12,000 strong, was reduced to less than 500 in under 17 minutes. No human casualties, not a single one. In the Andes command center, Elena Rodriguez allowed herself the briefest moment of a smile. "First contact," she said quietly, "is always the most important." Commander Krell stared at his tactical displays in absolute shock. The Zorn Collective had conquered civilizations for millennia. They had reduced entire planets to ash. They had never, not once in their history, encountered a species that could turn their own technological superiority into a weapon against them. Humanity's first message was clear. This was not going to be an invasion. This was going to be a lesson. The surviving Zorn leadership convened in an emergency session aboard the Dominion, their collective consciousness fracturing in a way it never had before. Commander Krell's holographic form pulsed with an energy that bordered on panic, an emotion entirely foreign to the Zorn Collective. "Analyze," he demanded of Vex and the other senior strategists. How is this possible? The tactical displays told a story of complete bewilderment. Where their initial invasion force should have obliterated Earth's defenses, they had instead lost over 70% of their first wave to what appeared to be an impossibly adaptive defense network. Unbeknownst to the Zorn, a small team was about to make their situation exponentially worse. Deep within a captured Zorn support vessel, a 4-person special operations team moved with a precision that defied conventional military training. Led by Dmitry Volkov, the team represented a culmination of humanity's most exceptional talents. Marcus Rice, a Special Forces veteran with 3 different military backgrounds. Dr. Aisha Okoye, a quantum physicist turned field operative. And Kai Chen, the cybersecurity genius who had become humanity's digital warfare specialist. "Remember," Volkov whispered, his voice a low growl that carried decades of combat experience, "we're not just infiltrating. We're teaching them a lesson." Their mission was audacious. While Earth's primary defenses had decimated the Zorn's first wave, this team would infiltrate the aliens' most sensitive systems, turning their own technology into a weapon of psychological warfare. Dr. Okoye moved to a biomechanical interface, her fingers dancing across surfaces that seemed to breathe and pulse with alien technology. "Their network is a collective consciousness," she muttered. "But every collective has weak points." Kai Chen was already working his digital magic. The communication systems of the Zorn vessel began to subtly change. What appeared to be standard data transfers became something far more insidious, a carefully crafted psychological virus designed to exploit the fundamental weaknesses of the Zorn's collective mind. On the Dominion's bridge, the first signs of infection began to appear. Tactical displays flickered. Communication channels became contaminated with fragments of human experiences, personal stories, individual moments of courage, snapshots of human complexity that the Zorn collective consciousness had never encountered. A soldier's last letter home, a child's drawing, a moment of sacrifice captured in perfect, heart-wrenching detail. For a species that operated as a pure collective, these individual narratives were more destructive than any weapon. Marcus Reyes watched the infiltration with a soldier's pragmatic eye. "We're not just fighting," he said to Volkov. "We're showing them something they've never understood." The Zorn had conquered hundreds of civilizations by understanding them as collective entities. Humanity was different. Every human was a universe unto themselves, connected yet fundamentally individual. This was a concept the Zorn could not comprehend. Aboard the Dominion, Commander Krell began to experience something unprecedented. Doubt, uncertainty, emotions that should have been impossible for a collective consciousness were seeping through their neural networks. "Contamination detected," Vex reported, his voice losing its previous certainty. "But the source, it defies our analysis." Dmitry Volkov allowed himself the smallest of smiles. Psychological warfare had always been humanity's most potent weapon. They weren't just fighting with technology. They were fighting with something far more powerful. Dr. Okoye discovered the true genius of their infiltration. The Zorn's collective consciousness was actually a weakness, By introducing individual narratives, they were creating cognitive dissonance that the aliens couldn't process. Each story was a weapon more powerful than any missile. They've never encountered individual choice, she explained to her team. For them, the collective is everything. We're introducing the concept of individual existence, and it's tearing them apart. Kai Chen's final touch was masterful. He began broadcasting specific frequencies that mimicked the Zorn's communication protocols, but were laden with human complexity. Stories of love, sacrifice, individual triumph. Each transmission a precisely crafted psychological weapon. The Zorn leadership began to fracture. For the first time in their species' history, individual thoughts began to emerge. Doubt, fear, uncertainty. They had thought humanity was a simple, primitive species. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Commander Krell stared at the contaminated displays, experiencing an emotion that would haunt the Zorn collective for generations. Genuine, paralyzing fear. The asteroid belt became a crucible of warfare that would redefine the meaning of strategic engagement. Commander Elena Rodriguez watched the developing battle from the Andes Mountain Command Center, her tactical displays transforming the chaotic space between Mars and Jupiter into a living, breathing battlefield of unprecedented complexity. Initiate adaptive terrain protocol, she commanded. What the Zorn saw as a simple asteroid field was about to become the most sophisticated combat environment in galactic history. Humanity had been studying this region for decades, mapping every rock, understanding every gravitational nuance, preparing for a moment just like this. Kai Chen's fingers flew across quantum-encrypted interfaces. Terrain manipulation at 78% capacity, he reported. Beside him, Dr. Aisha Okoye monitored quantum entanglement networks that turned the very fabric of space into a weapon. Commander Krell watched in growing horror as his carefully constructed battle algorithms began to disintegrate. The Zorn had conquered civilizations across the galaxy by reducing warfare to mathematical precision. Humanity was about to show them the fatal flaw in that approach. The first wave of Zorn ships entered the asteroid field with typical collective precision. Thousands of vessels moved in perfect synchronization, expecting to overwhelm any potential resistance through sheer numerical superiority. Their tactical systems had analyzed countless planetary invasions, calculated every possible defensive strategy. They had never encountered anything like this. Marcus Reyes managed the global coordination from a secondary command center in Peru. Initiating distributed combat network, he announced. What appeared to be simple mining satellites and communication relics transformed into a distributed weapons platform that defied every known principle of space warfare. Dmitry Volkov, monitoring the operation from a mobile command unit in the Arctic, explained the strategy to his team. We're not just fighting, he said, his voice a low growl shaped by decades of military experience. We're reimagining what combat means. The asteroids themselves became weapons. Quantum-enhanced gravitational manipulators, developed in secret laboratories around the world, began to move massive space rocks with impossible precision. What should have been random chunks of space debris became guided projectiles, each one targeted with mathematical perfection that made the Zorn's own targeting systems look primitive. Dr. Okoye's quantum network was the true marvel. We're using the entire solar system as a single adaptive weapon, she explained to Elena Rodriguez. Every asteroid, every piece of space debris, every gravitational interaction becomes part of our defense. The Zorn's first response was typical of their collective approach, a massive, overwhelming counterattack designed to crush any resistance through sheer firepower. But humanity had prepared for exactly this moment. Kai Chen unleashed the next phase of their strategy. The communication networks that the Zorn believed they were jamming suddenly became weapons themselves. Quantum-entangled data streams transformed every attempted alien communication into a cascading system of misinformation and strategic misdirection. Their algorithms are breaking down, Chen reported, a hint of satisfaction in his voice. They can't process the level of individual adaptation we're introducing. Commander Krell watched in growing panic as his tactical displays became increasingly nonsensical. The Zorn had a simple, fundamental belief that warfare could be reduced to mathematical precision. Humanity was about to prove how fundamentally wrong that belief was. Mining satellites retrofitted with weapons systems struck with impossible precision. Communication relays became distributed weapon platforms. Even the solar radiation was weaponized, transformed into a tool that could disrupt alien shield technologies. "They're treating this like a mathematical problem," Elena Rodriguez said quietly. "We're treating it like a living, breathing system." The battle became a dance of impossible complexity. Zorn ships that attempted to maintain their rigid formation found themselves manipulated by gravitational weapons that turned the asteroid belt into a constantly shifting maze. Every time the aliens thought they had found a pattern, humanity changed the entire equation. Volkov's voice came through the communication network. "They've never encountered an enemy that views warfare as a creative act," he observed. "For them, it's always been about mathematical reduction. For us, it's about constant reimagination." By the battle's halfway point, the Zorn had lost over 60% of their second invasion wave, not through overwhelming firepower, but through a form of warfare so adaptive, so fundamentally different from anything they had ever encountered, that their collective consciousness began to fracture. Commander Krell realized the terrifying truth. They were no longer fighting a species. They were fighting an entire planetary consciousness that could reimagine itself with every passing moment. And they were losing. The Dominion's bridge had become a chamber of growing terror. Commander Krell's collective consciousness writhed with an emotion the Zorn had never experienced before: genuine, paralyzing uncertainty. The quantum adaptive defense systems of Earth had transformed what should have been a simple planetary conquest into a nightmare of unpredictability. "Prometheus Protocol activated," Elena Rodriguez announced quietly, her voice carrying a weight that would echo through galactic history. The name was deliberate. Like the mythological titan who gave fire to humanity, this protocol was about to fundamentally change the rules of interstellar engagement. Deep within a converted offshore research platform in the Pacific, Dr. Aisha Okoye oversaw the final stages of a project decades in the making. Quantum entanglement networks, adaptive AI systems, and technologies that would make most scientific minds collapse in awe came to life simultaneously across the globe. Full network synchronization in 3, 2, 1. Kai Chen's fingers danced across quantum-encrypted interfaces, his eyes reflecting a complex holographic display that looked more like a living, breathing organism than any traditional computer system. What happened next was nothing short of revolutionary. Every piece of human technology, from the most advanced military satellite to the smartphone in a teenager's pocket, became part of a single, adaptive, planet-wide intelligence network. It wasn't just a defense system. It was a living, breathing planetary consciousness that could predict, adapt, and counter threats faster than any known technological system in the galaxy. Marcus Rice watched the global coordination with the eyes of a veteran who had seen humanity's darkest moments. "We're not just defending," he said to Dmitry Volkov. "We're teaching them a lesson about what intelligence really means." The Zorn had conquered civilizations by reducing warfare to mathematical precision. Humanity was about to show them the fatal flaw in that approach. Aboard the Dominion, Surveillance Officer Vex began to experience something unprecedented. The carefully constructed collective consciousness of the Zorn started to fragment. Individual thoughts, a concept entirely foreign to their species, began to emerge. Dmitry Volkov's Special Operations Team continued their infiltration of the Zorn's most sensitive systems. But this was more than a simple military operation. It was a fundamental assault on the aliens' understanding of consciousness itself. "Watch this," Dr. Okoye said, activating the most sophisticated aspect of the Prometheus Protocol. The solar system itself became a weapon. Gravitational manipulation systems, developed in secret laboratories around the world, began to subtly alter the trajectories of asteroids, planets, and even solar radiation. What appeared to be random cosmic interactions became a precisely calculated defensive network. Kai Chen's most brilliant contribution was a system that could predict alien movements milliseconds before they happened. It wasn't just about defense, it was about turning the entire concept of invasion on its head. Commander Krell watched in growing horror as his tactical displays became increasingly nonsensical. The Zorn had never encountered an enemy that could literally reshape the battlefield at a quantum level. Every time they adapted, humanity changed the entire equation. "They're not fighting," Vex reported, his translation matrix crackling with genuine fear. "They're evolving." The Prometheus Protocol was more than a defense system. It was a living, breathing planetary intelligence that could learn, adapt, and transform faster than any known technological system in the galaxy. Every piece of human technology, from the most advanced military satellite to the smartphone in a teenager's pocket, became part of a single adaptive network. Elena Rodriguez understood the true power of what they had created. This wasn't just about defending Earth. This was about demonstrating a fundamentally different approach to intelligence, to warfare, to existence itself. "We're showing them," she said quietly to her team, "that intelligence isn't about collective uniformity. It's about individual creativity working in perfect harmony." The Zorn invasion force began to experience system-wide failures. Their communication networks became contaminated with human complexity, individual stories, moments of personal triumph, fragments of human experience that their collective consciousness couldn't process. By the operation's halfway point, the Zorn had lost over 80% of their invasion force, not through overwhelming firepower, but through a form of warfare so adaptive, so fundamentally different from anything they had ever encountered, that their entire understanding of technological superiority began to crumble. Commander Krell realized the terrifying truth. They were no longer fighting a species. They were fighting a planetary consciousness that could reimagine itself with every passing moment. And they were losing. The Zorn Collective's emergency communication channels became a maelstrom of confusion and emerging individual consciousness. What had begun as a simple invasion was now a fundamental threat to their entire species' understanding of existence. Intercepted communications revealed a terrifying transformation. Individual thoughts, a concept entirely alien to the Zorn, began to emerge like cracks in a monolithic structure. Commander Krell's personal neural link started to fragment. For the first time in the collective's history, he experienced something profoundly human: doubt. Aboard the captured Zorn support vessel, Dmitry Volkov and his team were weaponizing humanity's most potent asset, psychological complexity. Dr. Aisha Okoy had discovered the critical vulnerability in the Zorn's collective consciousness, their inability to process individual narratives. "It's not about breaking their technology," she explained to Marcus Reyes. "It's about breaking their fundamental understanding of consciousness." Kai Chen's most insidious creation began to take full effect. The communication networks they had infiltrated weren't just transmitting data. They were broadcasting the essence of human experience. Raw, unfiltered, impossibly complex. A soldier's last letter home, a child's first steps, a moment of unexpected kindness in the midst of chaos. Personal stories that carried more psychological weight than any weapon. The Zorn had conquered hundreds of civilizations by reducing them to statistical probabilities. Humanity was something entirely different. A species where each individual was a universe unto themselves, yet capable of extraordinary collective action. "Watch this," Kai Chen said, activating a program that would become legendary. The intercepted Zorn communications began to fill with human experiences, not just data, but emotion. Not just information, but context. Each transmission was a precisely crafted psychological weapon designed to exploit the fundamental weakness of a collective consciousness. Commander Krell experienced the first true individual thought in the collective's history, a memory, a moment of doubt, a sense of fear. "This is impossible," Surveillance Officer Vex reported, his translation matrix crackling with genuine panic. The tactical displays showed something that defied every known law of the collective's existence. Individual narratives were spreading through their communication networks like a virus, creating cognitive dissonance that their unified consciousness couldn't process. Elena Rodriguez watched from the Andes Mountain Command Center, understanding the true battlefield was psychological, not technological. "We're not just fighting," she said quietly to her team. "We're teaching them what it means to be truly alive." The Zorn had a fundamental belief that consciousness was a collective experience, that individuality was a weakness to be eliminated. Humanity was about to prove how catastrophically wrong that belief was. Dmitry Volkov's Special Operations Team continued their infiltration, each movement a carefully choreographed psychological assault. They weren't just gathering intelligence. They were dismantling an entire species' understanding of existence. Individual choice, Dr. Okoye explained, is their greatest vulnerability. They've never encountered a species that can act both as a collective and as individuals. The communication networks became a battleground of consciousness. Each transmission carried layers of human complexity: love, fear, hope, individual triumph. Concepts that the Zorn Collective had systematically eliminated from their own existence. Kai Chen's most brilliant manipulation began to take effect. The quantum-entangled communication networks started to introduce subtle variations, individual perspectives, personal stories that contradicted the collective narrative. A memory of a mother's sacrifice, a moment of unexpected courage, a simple act of kindness that defied all logical calculation. Commander Krell watched in growing horror as his collective consciousness began to fragment. For the first time, the Zorn experienced something impossible: individual thought. "We are experiencing uncertainty," Vex reported, his voice losing its previous mechanical certainty. The Zorn had believed that individuality was a weakness. Humanity was about to show them it was the most powerful force in the universe. By the operation's conclusion, the Zorn invasion force was no longer a unified collective. It had become something else entirely, a fragmenting consciousness experiencing the terrifying beauty of individual existence. They had come to conquer Earth. They were about to learn what it truly meant to be alive. The space near Jupiter transformed into a crucible of cosmic warfare. What remained of the Zorn invasion fleet clustered in a desperate final formation, a last-ditch attempt to salvage their seemingly inevitable victory. Commander Krell's fractured consciousness struggled to maintain control. The collective that had conquered hundreds of civilizations was now a shattered mirror of its former self, individual thoughts bleeding through their once perfect unified network. "Prepare final assault protocol," Krell commanded, his voice a desperate echo of the absolute certainty that had defined the Zorn for millennia. Elena Rodriguez stood in the Andes Mountain Command Center, her team assembled like a precision instrument of human potential. Kai Chen's quantum interfaces pulsed with an almost living energy. Dr. Aisha Okoye monitored systems that blurred the line between technology and consciousness. Dmitry Volkov and Marcus Rice stood ready, the embodiment of human adaptability. "This is more than a battle," Elena said quietly. "This is a statement about what humanity represents." The Prometheus Protocol entered its final phase. What appeared to be simple communication satellites and space debris began to transform. Every piece of human technology, from the most advanced military system to the most mundane communication device, became part of a living, breathing defensive network. Kai Chen's most brilliant creation came to life: the distributed network of quantum-entangled systems that could predict, counter, and manipulate the Zorn's movements faster than the aliens could comprehend. Each moment became a complex dance of possibility, with humanity several steps ahead. The first wave of Zorn attacks met with a response that defied every known principle of space warfare. Gravitational manipulation systems, developed in secret laboratories around the world, began to move entire asteroid fields with impossible precision. What should have been random chunks of space became guided projectiles, each targeted with mathematical perfection that made the Zorn's targeting systems look primitive. They're using the entire solar system as a weapon, Vex reported, his translation matrix crackling with genuine fear. Commander Krell watched in growing horror. The tactical displays became a nightmare of impossible interactions. Every time the Zorn attempted to establish a battle formation, humanity changed the entire equation. Asteroids became shields. Solar radiation became a weapon. The very fabric of space became a tool of defense and destruction. Dmitry Volkov's Special Operations Team continued their infiltration of the Zorn's most sensitive systems. But this was more than a military operation. It was a fundamental assault on the aliens' understanding of warfare, of consciousness, of existence itself. "We're teaching them a lesson," Volkov said to Marcus Reyes. "Warfare isn't about collective uniformity. It's about individual creativity working in perfect harmony." The battle became a living, breathing entity. Zorn ships that attempted to maintain their rigid formation found themselves manipulated by gravitational weapons that turned the space near Jupiter into a constantly shifting maze of destruction. Every pattern the aliens discovered was immediately rendered obsolete. Dr. Okoy's quantum network reached its full potential. "We're not just defending," she reported. "We're demonstrating an entirely new form of intelligence." Commander Krell realized the terrifying truth in the battle's final moments. They were no longer fighting a species. They were fighting a planetary consciousness that could reimagine itself with every passing moment. Kai Chen's most devastating weapon was psychological. The communication networks began to broadcast something the Zorn had never encountered: individual human experiences, moments of sacrifice, acts of unexpected kindness. Personal stories that carried more weight than any technological weapon. The Zorn invasion force began to experience system-wide failures. Their communication networks became contaminated with human complexity, individual narratives that their collective consciousness couldn't process. "Initiate final protocol," Elena Rodriguez commanded. The Prometheus protocol reached its ultimate expression. The entire solar system became a single adaptive weapon system. Every satellite, every piece of space debris, every quantum-entangled system worked in perfect improvisational harmony. In the final moments, Commander Krell experienced something impossible for his species: individual thought, fear, uncertainty, the realization that their understanding of existence was fundamentally flawed. By the battle's conclusion, the Zorn invasion force was reduced to less than 5% of its original strength, not through overwhelming firepower, but through a form of warfare so adaptive, so fundamentally different from anything they had ever encountered, that their entire understanding of technological superiority collapsed. They had come to conquer Earth. They would leave having learned the most important lesson in the universe. Humanity was not a species to be conquered. Humanity was a force of nature. The aftermath of the battle was unlike anything in galactic history. Captured Zorn vessels littered the space between Mars and Jupiter, silent monuments to humanity's unexpected triumph. In the Andes Mountain Command Center, Commander Elena Rodriguez stood before the United Earth Council, her presentation less a military report and more a fundamental reimagining of interstellar existence. "We're not conquerors," she said, her voice carrying the weight of humanity's collective experience. "We're an invitation." The surviving Zorn leadership, what remained of their once mighty collective, faced a choice that would define their species' future. Kai Chen had prepared the most complex diplomatic communication in human history, a quantum-entangled message that was simultaneously a warning, an opportunity, and a profound philosophical challenge. Dr. Aisha Okoy explained the diplomatic strategy to Marcus Reyes. "We're offering them something they've never encountered," she said, "a chance to understand individual existence." Dmitry Volkov oversaw the initial contact protocols. The former Special Forces commander understood that this was more than a diplomatic mission. It was an opportunity to fundamentally transform an entire species' understanding of consciousness. The captured Zorn technologies underwent rapid analysis. What the aliens had considered their greatest strength, a collective consciousness that eliminated individual variation, became the key to their potential transformation. Human scientists discovered that the Zorn's neural networks could be reconfigured, their collective consciousness gradually introduced to the concept of individual experience. Commander Krell, now separated from the collective for the first time in his existence, experienced something profound. Individual thought, emotion, the terrifying, beautiful complexity of personal existence. We're offering you a choice, Elena Rodriguez's message began. Integrate, learn, evolve. The United Earth Council had prepared for multiple scenarios: military containment, total destruction, diplomatic isolation, but the approach they ultimately chose was quintessentially human, an invitation to understand, to grow, to become something more. Kai Chen's quantum communication network became the bridge, not a weapon, but a method of understanding. Each transmission carried layers of human experience, moments of individual triumph, of collective achievement, of the complex tapestry that defined human existence. The captured Zorn technologies revealed something unexpected. Their collective consciousness wasn't a strength, it was a limitation. Every species they had conquered had been reduced to a statistical probability, stripped of individual potential. Humanity offered something entirely different. Dr. Okoye's team began the delicate process of neural reconfiguration. It wasn't about destroying the Zorn's collective nature, but expanding it, introducing the concept of individual potential within a larger framework of collective purpose. We're not breaking them, she explained to the council. We're helping them evolve. Marcus Reyes managed the initial diplomatic and security protocols. The military veteran understood that this was a different kind of warfare, a battle for understanding, for potential, for a fundamentally new way of existing. Dmitry Volkov prepared potential containment strategies, but his primary focus was on integration. The Special Forces commander saw the opportunity for something unprecedented, a true joining of two different forms of consciousness. The first breakthrough came unexpectedly. Commander Krell, separated from the collective, began to experience individual emotions: fear, wonder, hope, the very things the Zorn had systematically eliminated from their existence. Kai Chen's communication networks became a conduit of transformation. Each transmission carried the essence of human complexity, individual stories that demonstrated how personal experience could enhance, not destroy, collective purpose. The United Earth Council's decision was unanimous. This wasn't a conquest. This was an opportunity for mutual evolution. We're offering you a choice, Elena Rodriguez's final transmission stated. Understand individual potential. Recognize the power of personal experience. Evolve. The space near Jupiter became something new, not a battlefield, but a point of first true contact. The remnants of the Zorn invasion fleet, now transformed into a potential bridge between civilizations, hung in silent testimony to humanity's most profound victory. It wasn't about defeating an enemy. It was about showing another species the true potential of conscious existence. Humanity had defended its home, but more importantly, it had offered a new way of understanding what it means to be alive.